My name is Memgene Ingram. I'm 32 years old, a registered nurse in Willowbrook, Tennessee, and I still carry a letter in my wallet that my grandfather wrote 3 weeks before he died. When I was 18, my father looked me in the eye during the worst thunderstorm in a decade, called me broken, and told me to get out of his house. My brother had told him a lie, and my father believed it without a single question, because believing it was easier than admitting the truth about his only son. 3 hours later, the police called my parents to the hospital, and the person sitting next to my bed, the person who'd found me face down in a drainage ditch on Route 7, was the last face my father ever expected to see. His own mother, the woman he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. But that night was only the beginning. What happened 2 years later in front of every business owner in Willowbrook made my father wish the storm had taken his memory instead. Welcome back to Family Payback Files. This is where we share stories of families torn apart by betrayal and the people who refuse to stay broken. If you've ever been treated like you didn't matter in your own family, this one's for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Willowbrook is the kind of town where everybody knows your truck before they know your name. My father, Ray Ingram, ran Ingram Auto and Tire on the corner of Route 7 and Pine, the same shop his father Harold built from nothing 40 years ago. 2 bays, a parts counter, a waiting room that smelled like brake dust and burnt coffee. That shop was our family's identity. Its name was on the sign, on the checks, on the church donation plaques, and according to my father, it belonged to the men of this family. My brother Tyler was 2 years older than me. By he was 12. Dad had him out on the shop floor learning to rotate tires and sweet-talk customers. I asked to come along once. I was 10. Dad said, "The shop floor isn't for you, Megan." He didn't say it mean. He said it like he was telling me the sky was blue. At home, my mother, Pam, ran a tight ship, and I was her crew. I cooked, I cleaned, I folded laundry while Tyler played video games in the living room with his feet on the coffee table. One night I asked why Tyler didn't have to wash dishes. Mom said, "He's resting, he's been at the shop." I'd been at school all day, and then scrubbed the bathroom grout with a toothbrush, but that didn't count the same way. Dad said it best one evening at dinner, the kind of thing he tossed out like a joke, except nobody laughed. Boys carry the name, girls carry the dishes. Tyler grinned. I set my fork down and looked at my mother. She was already clearing plates. Here's the thing about being invisible in your own house. You notice everything. By 16, I knew more about Ingram Auto's finances than Tyler ever would. It started small. One afternoon, Dad was busy under a Chevy Silverado. Tyler was who knows where, and the shop phone rang. A customer needed a quote on a set of all-terrain tires for a Ford F-250. I pulled the supplier catalog off the shelf, looked up the part number, calculated markup the way I'd watched Martha do it, and gave the customer a price. He ordered 4. When he came to pick them up, he told my father, "Your daughter knows her stuff." Dad nodded and changed the subject. That summer, I started looking at the shop's books, not because anyone asked, but because the invoices were piling up on the counter like autumn leaves, and 2 suppliers had sent past due notices in red ink. I built a spreadsheet on an old laptop, tracked every payable, set up a calendar for due dates, and called the suppliers to negotiate payment plans. Within 3 months, the late fees dropped to 0. Martha Calloway, she'd been running the front desk for 12 years, was the only person who noticed. She caught me one evening entering receipts after I'd already finished the dinner dishes at home. She leaned against the door frame and said quietly, "You're running half this place and nobody notices." I didn't do it for praise. I did it because the numbers were wrong. And wrong numbers bothered me the way a crooked picture frame bothers some people. I couldn't not fix them. But I won't pretend it didn't sting when Dad handed Tyler a shop manager polo shirt the following spring and never once mentioned the books. I want to be clear about something. I was never the kind of girl who sat in silence and swallowed it. When I was 17, Dad announced at dinner that Tyler would become assistant manager after high school graduation. Tyler had just failed his 3rd attempt at the ASE brake certification. I put my water glass down. "I've been balancing your invoice spreadsheet for a year," I said. "Tyler can't read a parts catalog." The table went quiet. Dad's jaw tightened. "That's bookkeeping. That's different from running a business." "Bookkeeping is running a business," I said. "Without it, you would have lost 2 suppliers last March when those net 30 invoices hit 60 days. Dad's face went red. He moved his fork around his plate and said, "Tyler's learning. He'll get there." Tyler didn't look up from his phone. After dinner, Mom pulled me into the kitchen. Her voice was low. "Don't embarrass your father in front of Tyler." "I'm not embarrassing him, I'm telling the truth. Truth doesn't matter if it makes people uncomfortable, Megan." That sentence stayed with me longer than of Dad's because it explained everything, not just about our family, but about how the whole system ran. Comfort over truth. Tradition over evidence. Son over daughter. Because that's how it had always been. I made a decision that night. After I graduated high school, I was leaving. I'd already been looking at the community college nursing program, something I could fund through scholarships if I kept my GPA up. I had a plan, a timeline, and a folder of application materials hidden in my closet. The storm came 4 months before I was ready. By the time Tyler turned 19 and officially had assistant manager on his name tag, the shop had a new kind of problem. Tyler showed up late 3 days a week. He left early on Fridays. He forgot to place orders, double-ordered brake pads nobody needed, and once let a customer's car sit on the lift for 2 days because he lost the work ticket in his truck. Martha covered for him when she could. She had a mortgage and a 10-year-old, and she needed that paycheck more than she needed honesty. 1 month, Tyler ordered 40 sets of the wrong tire size. The supplier didn't do returns on bulk. That was $3,200 in dead inventory stacked against the back wall. Dad blamed the supplier's website, not Tyler. That was the pattern. Tyler broke something. Someone else caught the blame, and Dad patched over it because the alternative, admitting that the heir to Ingram Auto was incompetent, would crack the only story he'd ever told himself about this family. I noticed something else too. Tyler had started taking the shop's tow truck out at night. I could hear the diesel engine fire up around 11, long after Dad was asleep. I asked Tyler about it the next morning. He was eating cereal, standing over the kitchen sink. "Where did you take the tow truck last night?" He didn't look at me. "Mind your own business. That truck is registered to the shop." "If something happens," I said, "mind your own business, Megan." He put his bowl in the sink and walked out. I should have pushed harder. I didn't. Because in 4 months, I'd be gone and the truck would be someone else's problem. Except, the truck became my problem. Whole lot sooner than that. It was a Friday in late March. The National Weather Service had issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the entire county starting at 9 p.m. By 10,000 the wind was bending the dogwood sideways and rain was hammering the roof hard enough to rattle the window panes. I went to bed early because I had a Saturday morning shift helping Martha open the shop. Dad still let me answer phones even if he didn't call it real work. I fell asleep around 10:30. Sometime after midnight, Tyler took the tow truck. He drove it to a buddy's place on the other side of town, drank half a bottle of bourbon, and then tried to drive home on Route 7 in the kind of rain that turns asphalt into a river. He lost control 1.5 miles from our house. The truck slid off the road and dropped its front end into a drainage ditch, cracking the right headlight assembly, bending the front bumper, and burying the front axle in 3 feet of mud. Tyler climbed out, left the truck, sitting crooked in the ditch, and walked home in the rain. He came in through the back door. Then he went to my room. I was asleep. He took my phone off the nightstand, unlocked it. I hadn't set a passcode, which I never made that mistake again, and sent 2 texts to his own phone. The first one said, "Borrowing the truck tonight, don't tell Dad." The second said, "Heading out on Route 7. Then he deleted the text from my phone, put it back on the nightstand, and went to his room. By the time I woke up Saturday morning, my father was already standing in the Ferrio kitchen with Tyler's phone in his hand, reading those 2 messages. Dad didn't ask me, he told me. "You took the truck out last night." I was standing at the counter pouring coffee. I set the pot down. "I didn't take any truck. Tyler's phone has your texts. You asked to borrow it." Route 7. "Dad, I was asleep by 10:30. Check my phone. There aren't any texts." Tyler was leaning against the refrigerator with his arms crossed. She deleted them. I watched her this morning. Mom stood by the doorway. I looked at her, hoping for something. "Not rescue, just a pause," she said. "She's been getting rebellious lately. Maybe this will teach her." I turned back to Dad. "Look at the truck damage. Check Tyler's boots. If he walked 3 miles in mud last night, his boots are still wet. Check the ditch for his tire tracks, not mine. I don't even know how to start that truck." Dad's face was already decided. The evidence was on Tyler's phone. The narrative fit the story he'd been telling himself for 18 years. The son builds, the daughter breaks. He didn't check Tyler's boots. He didn't check anything. He stepped forward, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath, and said the words I still hear when it rains. "Get lost. I'm done raising a broken girl." I looked at Tyler. He looked away. I looked at Mom. She was wiping the counter. 3 against 1. I went upstairs, grabbed the backpack I'd already packed for my eventual move out 4 months early. Clothes, my laptop, the scholarship folder, $42 in cash. I walked down the stairs, opened the front door, and stepped into the storm. The door closed behind me. Nobody opened it again. Route 7 was a river of black water and debris. I walked east toward the only person I thought might take me in, Lorraine Ingram, my father's mother. Her farmhouse was 3 miles down that road. I'd almost made it when my foot caught a rut in the flooded ditch that ran along her gravel drive, and I hit my forehead on a culvert stone and went down. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and realized not one of them was going to speak up, you know exactly what that silence sounds like. If this story is hitting close to home, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe, because what happened next at that hospital changed everything. What I'm about to tell you, I learned afterward. I was unconscious in a ditch when it happened. So this part comes from my grandmother Lorraine and from the paramedic report I read 6 weeks later when I requested a copy. Lorraine Ingram was 72 years old. She'd been living alone since my grandfather Harold died 8 years earlier. She'd taken his $50,000 life insurance payout and done something nobody in Willowbrook expected. She started buying small houses, fixing them up with her own hands and a retired contractor she'd known from church, and renting them out. By the time of the storm, she owned 8 rental properties scattered across the county. She wasn't wealthy. She was comfortable, independent, and respected. The kind of woman people called Miss Lorraine, even if they were 50 years old themselves. That night, around 30 in the morning, the storm finally broke. Lorraine had been up for hours because thunderstorms made her restless. They had since Harold died alone in the shop during a storm while she was visiting her sister in Knoxville. She pulled on boots and went out to check her fence line and the chicken coop the way she always did after heavy weather. Her flashlight swept the gravel drive leading up to the farmhouse. She saw my backpack first, then she saw me. Face down, a dark line of blood running from my forehead into the mud. She dropped the flashlight, knelt beside me, pressed 2 fingers to my neck, and called 911 from her cell phone. When the ambulance came, she rode with them. Snorts. At the hospital. The intake nurse asked what happened. Lorraine said her father threw her out in a thunderstorm. She's 18 years old and she walked 3 miles in this. The nurse wrote it down. Then Lorraine sat in the chair next to my bed and didn't move. The police came as standard protocol. A young woman found injured and unconscious on a rural road during a severe weather event. They took Lorraine's statement. They noted the circumstances. Then they called the Ingram household. It was almost 5:00 in the morning when my parents walked through the emergency room doors. I know this because by then I drifted in and out of consciousness twice. And the second time I opened my eyes, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The heavy, deliberate kind that belong to a man who doesn't want to be where he is. Dad came around the curtain first. I was lying on a gurney with 4 stitches above my left eyebrow, a thermal blanket over my shoulders, and an IV drip for dehydration. He saw me, and for half a second his face did something I'd never seen before. It crumpled, like a man who just realized he left the stove on, and the house was already burning. Then he saw the chair. Lorraine was sitting upright, hands folded in her lap, wearing the same mud-stained boots she'd knelt in beside the ditch. My father hadn't spoken to his mother in 3 years, not since she'd sat him down at her kitchen table and told him, "Don't do to Megan what your father did to your sisters." He'd called that an insult to Harold's memory, walked out, never called back. Now here she was. Dad's face went white. Mom stepped in behind him and put her hand over her mouth. Lorraine didn't stand. She looked at Ray the way you look at a dog that knocked over the trash and knows it. Calm, tired, completely unsurprised. "Sit down, Raymond." Dad sat. Lorraine said, 3 years ago I told you don't repeat what your father did. Tonight you threw your daughter into a storm because a boy told you a lie." She paused. "I drove past the shop at 9 last night. The tow truck was parked crooked. I saw headlights on Route 7 going the wrong direction around midnight. An officer stepped into the room. We checked the tow truck this morning, found a wallet under the driver's seat. It belongs to Tyler Ingram. Dad didn't say anything for a long time. He sat in the molded plastic chair across from Lorraine with his hands on his knees and stared at the floor tile between his boots. Mom stood behind him. She hadn't moved. The officer explained what came next. They'd be going to the house to speak with Tyler. The wallet, combined with the text sent from my phone at a time when multiple people could confirm I was asleep, was enough to open a line of questioning. They also told Dad that a report had been filed regarding the circumstances of my leaving the house. An 18-year-old is legally an adult, the officer said. But throwing someone out during a severe thunderstorm warning, when you know they have no vehicle and no shelter, could meet the threshold for reckless endangerment under Tennessee law. Whether the DA pursues charges depends on what else we find, the officer said, but the report is filed, Mr. Ingram. Dad looked at the officer, then at Lorraine, then at me. He opened his mouth, closed it. Mom took a half step forward. I watched her hand reach toward the edge of my blanket. Her fingers trembled. She almost touched the fabric. Then she pulled her hand back, folded her arms, and looked at the floor. That was her near sympathy moment. The closest Pam Ingram ever came to choosing me over the system she'd married into. It lasted about 2 seconds. When the officer left, Lorraine said, "Megan will be staying with me." Dad didn't argue. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the room without looking back. Mom followed. The door closed and the room got very quiet. I turned my head toward Lorraine. She put her hand on mine. "You're safe now." I cried for the first time in years, not because I was sad, because someone had finally said it out loud. Lorraine's farmhouse sat on 4 acres of flat ground east of town. It had a kitchen that smelled like cast iron and lavender, a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, and a spare bedroom. Upstairs with a window that looked out over her garden. Nobody had slept in that room since my Aunt Kate visited 2 Christmases ago. Lorraine stripped the bed, put on fresh sheets, and set a towel on the dresser. "You live here, you contribute," she said. "Mornings, help me with the rental properties. Afternoons, study. No pity, no soft speeches, just structure." I respected that more than any sympathy she could have offered. The first week was strange. I kept waiting for someone to knock on the front door and demand I come home. Nobody did. Dad didn't call. Tyler didn't call. Mom called once, on the 3rd day. Her voice was small, practiced. "Come home, Megan. Your father didn't mean it. He meant every word, Mom, and you stood there and let him say it." Silence on the line, then a girl's place is with her family. My family was the woman who pulled me out of a ditch. Mom hung up. She didn't call again for 5 months. Meanwhile, Tyler's problems caught up to him in the slow, grinding way that the truth tends to work. The police questioned him. The wallet, the fake texts, the timeline. It all unraveled under basic questioning. Tyler admitted to taking the truck. DUI plus reckless operation of a commercial vehicle. Misdemeanor charges, probation, 6-month license suspension. Dad managed to get the sentence reduced through a local judge who owed him a favor on some transmission work, but the court record was public. In Willow Creek, public means permanent. The scholarship letter arrived in April, 3 weeks after I moved in with Lorraine. I'd applied before the storm. My exit plan had always been the community college nursing program, and I'd sent the application the same week I hid the folder in my closet. I tore the envelope open at Lorraine's kitchen table. Full tuition, 2 years, contingent on maintaining a 3.5 GPA. Lorraine looked at the letter over her reading glasses and said, "I'll cover the books and the rest." I tried to say she didn't have to. She held up her hand. "I didn't ask if I had to. I said I would." That was Lorraine. Mornings, I helped her manage the rental properties. We drove her old Buick from house to house, checking leaky faucets, replacing smoke detector batteries, meeting tenants who paid on time, and mediating with the ones who didn't. She taught me how to read a lease agreement, how to do a walk-through inspection, how to talk to people who were behind on rent without making them feel small. In nursing school, I found out I was good at the same things I'd been good at in the shop. Paying attention to details, staying calm when things went sideways, keeping track of numbers that mattered. Except now, the people around me noticed. My clinical instructor told me I had the steadiest hands in the cohort. A patient's wife wrote a note to the department saying I was the first nurse who actually listened. Meanwhile, news from the shop trickled in to Martha. Tyler was officially assistant manager again. Dad had wiped the slate naturally, but customers were starting to complain. Orders were late. Service quality was slipping. Martha said the waiting room was half empty most mornings. The shop was holding, barely, but the cracks were widening. Working alongside Lorraine taught me more about business than my father ever could have. Her 8 rental properties were modest, 2-bedroom homes, mostly, but she ran them with the precision of someone who understood that small numbers add up. Total portfolio value somewhere around $600,000. Not flashy money, smart money, quiet money, the kind that doesn't need a sign on a building to prove it exists. What surprised me was how much Willowbrook respected her. Lorraine was a founding member of the Willowbrook Business Association. Group of local owners who met quarterly, sponsored the 4th of July parade, and every December held an annual awards dinner at the community center. She'd been voted Business Leader of the Year 4 years earlier. People called her Miss Lorraine at the grocery store, at church, at the post office. They asked her opinion on property taxes and school board candidates. She had the kind of reputation you can't buy, only build, year after year, by doing what you say you'll do. One afternoon, while we were repainting a porch railing on one of her rentals, she mentioned the upcoming annual dinner. Every year, they hand out awards and pat each other on the back, she said, brushing primer onto a spindle. Your father's been wanting a seat at the head table for as long as I can remember. I didn't think much of it then. It sounded like small-town gossip. She also said something else that day, quieter, almost to herself. I've been thinking about what to do with these properties when I'm gone. Harold would have left everything to your father, but Harold isn't here anymore. She dipped her brush and kept painting. I kept painting too. But I filed that sentence away in the same mental cabinet where I kept every unanswered question this family had ever given me. 6 months after the storm, on a Tuesday evening when rain was tapping the kitchen windows like it was asking to come in, Lorraine sat me down at her table with a tin box I'd never seen before. Snorts. It was the kind of box you'd buy at a hardware store, flat, olive green, the lid dented from years of being opened and closed. She set it on the table and folded her hands over it. Your grandfather wrote this 3 weeks before he died, she said. He, Snorts, asked me to hold on to it until the right time. She opened the box, took out a yellowed envelope, and slid it across to me. The handwriting on the front said, For Lorraine, when she knows. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was thin, the handwriting shaky. The penmanship of a man whose hands had spent 40 years under car hoods, but were now losing their grip on a ballpoint pen. Harold's letter wasn't long. He wrote about the shop, about the early years when he'd worked 16-hour days to keep the doors open. He wrote about Ray, his pride, his successor, the boy he'd trained to take over. And then, near the bottom, the handwriting got smaller, like he was trying to hide what he was saying from himself. He wrote about his daughters, Kate and Doris. He said he built the shop for his boy and forgot his girls had hands too. He said, Snorts. Kate could have run the place better than he ever did. He wrote that he was too proud to see it, and by the time he did, Kate was already in Knoxville, and Doris had stopped returning his calls. The last line was underlined twice. If he does it again, Lorraine, don't let my granddaughters pay the price. May my daughters pay. I read it 3 times. Each time, I heard Dad's voice underneath Harold's words. I'm done raising a broken girl. The grandfather who started it all had seen where it would end. He'd just seen it too late. I folded the letter, put it in my wallet, and it hasn't left since. A year after the storm, Tyler was running the shop the way a teenager runs. A lemonade stand, showing up when he felt like it, and pocketing whatever he could reach. Martha called me on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was careful, the way people talk when they're saying something they've been rehearsing. Something's off with the register, Megan. Cash payments aren't matching deposits. I've been doing this 15 years. The numbers don't lie. I asked her to be specific. She said customers paying cash for oil changes, tire rotations, small repairs. The service log showed the work was done, but the deposits to the business account were coming up short. 200 here, 400 there. Over weeks, it added up. I told her to start keeping a record. Every cash transaction, date, customer, amount, what was logged in the service book, what showed up in the bank deposit, photograph the register tape at the end of each day. Note which days Tyler closed alone. I'm not asking you to spy on him. I said, I'm asking you to protect yourself. If those numbers are off and someone audits the shop, the person behind the front desk gets the questions first. Martha said she understood. She started keeping a notebook in her glove compartment. I didn't go looking for trouble. I wasn't sitting in Lorraine's farmhouse plotting revenge. I was finishing my second semester of nursing clinicals and studying for my pharmacology final. But when Martha showed me the pattern, I recognized it immediately because I'd built the system Tyler was stealing from. The spreadsheet, the deposit calendar, the supplier tracking. Those were my structures, and he was bleeding them dry. I knew exactly where to look because I'd built the walls he was punching holes through. 2 years after the storm, I graduated from the nursing program with the highest GPA in my cohort. Lorraine sat in the front row at the pinning ceremony wearing a blue blazer she'd pressed that morning. Martha came too, drove 40 minutes after her Saturday shift. She brought flowers from the gas station wrapped in cellophane that crinkled. Every time she moved, my parents were not there, Tyler was not there. Nobody from the Ingram household acknowledged the invitation I'd mailed 3 weeks earlier. An invitation Lorraine had insisted I send because she believed in giving people a chance to do the right thing, even when the odds were against it. The ceremony was small. 18 graduates in white scrubs lined up on a community college stage that smelled like floor wax and ambition. When they pinned my badge, I looked at Lorraine. She gave me a single nod. That was enough. I started at the county hospital 2 weeks later. Night shift, medical surgical floor. The work was hard, honest, and visible. Patients knew my name. Doctors trusted my charting. The charge nurse told me, after my first month, that I was the calmest new hire she'd ever trained. I didn't tell her where the calm came from. In Willowbrook, the storm night story had already made its own rounds, not because I told anyone, I didn't, but because small towns have long memories and short fences. Martha mentioned it to a friend. A paramedic told his wife. The hospital intake nurse remembered the report. People in the grocery store started looking at Ray differently. Not with hostility. With the quiet withdrawal that happens when a community realizes someone they respected did something they can't explain away. Ray's shop lost about 1/3 of its customers that year. Some switched to Johnson's Auto in the next town over. Others just stopped coming. My father called Lorraine for the first time in 5 years on a Wednesday evening in October. I was in the next room reading a pharmacology update at the kitchen table, and Lorraine had the phone volume turned up the way people over 70 tend to. I heard every word. "My name is thinking we should talk." His voice was stiff, like a man reading from a card he'd written himself. Lorraine leaned back in her chair. "About what, Raymond?" "About how you threw my granddaughter out, like a stray dog. Tyler made a mistake. I overreacted, but she's doing fine now, isn't she?" That's what he said. "She's doing fine now." As though the storm, the ditch, the stitches, the police report, and the 2 years I spent rebuilding my entire life were just a bump in the road. And since the road was smooth again, nobody owed anybody anything. Lorraine's voice was steady. "She's doing fine because of me, not because of you." She hung up without saying goodbye. I looked at her from the kitchen table. She looked at me. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then she shook her head and poured herself more tea. I understood what that call was about, and it wasn't reconciliation. The shop was bleeding. Ray's reputation was dented, and Lorraine, with her 8 rental properties and her founding seat on the business association, was the only person in town who could lend him credibility. He wasn't calling because he missed his mother. He was calling because he needed something, and missing your mother would have been free. What he wanted had a price he couldn't even name yet. I went back to my reading, but I noticed Lorraine's hands were steady. She'd been expecting that call. My father didn't call because he missed me. He called because his business was bleeding customers, and his mother held the only reputation in town that could save him. If you ever watched someone crawl back only when they needed something, not because they were sorry, tell me about it in the comments. More is coming. Martha drove out to the farmhouse on a Sunday afternoon in November, her day off, carrying a manila folder thick enough to prop open a door. She sat at Lorraine's kitchen table, set the folder between us, and opened it. Inside, 14 months of receipts, daily cash register tapes, handwritten notes cross-referencing service log entries with bank deposit slips. Every page was dated, organized, chronologically, and flagged with yellow sticky taps wherever the numbers didn't match. Martha had done this on her own time, in her car, after shifts. She hadn't told anyone at the shop. "I stayed quiet too long," she said. She looked at me, then at Lorraine. "But I'm not going to watch him steal from the man who signs my paycheck, even if that man doesn't deserve my loyalty." I pulled the folder toward me and started going through it page by page. The pattern was clean and consistent. Tyler would close the shop alone on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Cash payments from customers for oil changes, tire repairs, brake checks. The service log showed the work completed and the customer charged. But when Martha compared those entries to the daily bank deposits, the cash from Tyler's solo closing shifts was consistently short. 200 on a slow day, 400 on a good one. I built a spreadsheet that afternoon, right there at the kitchen table. Cross-referenced every discrepancy against the days Tyler closed alone. 14 months, approximately $18,000. Martha watched me work and said, "What do we do with it?" I looked at Lorraine. Lorraine looked at the folder, then at me. "If you bring this to your father, he won't listen. He never does." She paused. "Then don't bring it to your father. Bring it to the people who matter." Lorraine explained it the way she explained everything, simply, with no wasted words. The Willow Creek Business Association held its annual awards dinner every December at the community center. Not snorts. Part celebration, part accountability. The association recognized outstanding local businesses, and one of the awards, Business of the Year, came with a plaque, a write-up in the local paper, and the kind of public validation that mattered deeply in a town this size. Ray had submitted Ingram Auto for the award that year. First time he'd ever applied. Tyler was listed as co-manager on the application. "The board reviews financials before making a selection," Lorraine said. 5 members, and I'm one of them. If Tyler is stealing from the business he's supposed to manage, the board has a right to know before they hand Ingram Auto a plaque and a handshake. I sat with that for a moment. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "No," Lorraine agreed. "It's about due diligence." Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared a formal presentation. Spreadsheets comparing cash intake to bank deposits, service log entries matched against register tapes, a timeline showing the correlation between Tyler's solo closing shifts and the missing funds. Clean, factual, documented. No emotion, no accusations. I couldn't back up with numbers on a page. Lorraine also asked a CPA she knew from church, a woman named Patrice Gunn, who had done tax prep for half the businesses in the county, to independently review the figures. Patrice spent one evening with the folder, ran her own calculations, and confirmed the discrepancy was real, consistent, and attributable to a single pattern. I printed the report on Lorraine's home printer the night before the dinner. 12 pages, every number verified twice. I put it in a black folder and set it on the dresser in my bedroom. Then I went to sleep, which surprised me. I thought I'd be awake all night. But I wasn't. The math was done. The rest was just delivery. 2 weeks before the dinner, Ray showed up at the farmhouse unannounced. I saw his truck pull into the gravel drive from the upstairs window. Tyler was sitting in the passenger seat staring straight ahead. Lorraine went to the porch. I stayed inside by the door where I could hear. "Ma, I want us to be a family again," Ray said. He was standing on the bottom step, hat in his hand, doing his best impression of a humble man. "Megan too. Tyler wants to apologize." Lorraine looked past him to the truck. "Tyler's in the car. If he wants to apologize, he can walk up here and say it himself." Tyler didn't move, didn't open the door, didn't roll down the window. He sat in the passenger seat like a man waiting for a drive-through order. Ray shifted his weight. The business award dinner. It would mean a lot to have the family together. Ingram Auto. Dad's legacy. Don't you want to see it honored? Lorraine wiped her hands on her work apron. "Your father's legacy isn't a plaque, Raymond. It's what you do with what he built." Ray waited like he expected more. Lorraine just looked at him. After a minute, he put his hat back on, walked to the truck, and got in. Through the window, I watched Tyler lean over and ask something. Ray shook his head and started the engine. They pulled out of the drive. Gravel popped under the tires. I went back to the kitchen and sat down. Lorraine came in a moment later and poured herself a glass of water. "He thinks I'll come around," she said. I didn't say anything. I was thinking about the black folder on my dresser and the 12 pages inside it. And I was thinking about a letter in my wallet that said, "Don't let my granddaughters pay the price I made my daughters pay." The night before the ceremony, I sat at Lorraine's kitchen table with the folder open and a cup of tea going cold beside it. I'd reviewed the numbers 4 times already. They didn't change. $18,000. 14 months. 1 pattern. Lorraine was in the next room reading a newspaper. The house was quiet the way farmhouses get in December. Deep quiet, the kind that makes you hear your own breathing. I pulled Harold's letter out of my wallet. The paper was softer now from being folded and unfolded. I built this shop for my boy and forgot my girls had hands too. I thought about what I was going to do the next night. Not whether I'd settled that weeks ago. The numbers were real. The CPA had verified them, and the board had a right to know before they put an award plaque on a business with an $18,000 hole in its cash flow. But I sat with the feeling underneath the decision. Was I doing this for the right reasons? Was there a part of me that wanted to see my father's face when the numbers hit the table? Honest answer, yes, there was. But that wasn't why I was doing it. I was doing it because if Tyler kept stealing and nobody stopped him, the shop would close. And Ingram Auto employed Martha and 2 part-time mechanics, and 100 families in this town depended on a working auto shop within driving distance. The right thing and the satisfying thing happened to overlap. I didn't see any reason to apologize for that. Lorraine appeared in the doorway. You ready? Yes. She nodded. Your grandfather would be proud. I put the letter back in my wallet, closed the folder, and washed my teacup in the sink. Then I went to bed, and I slept the whole night through. The Willowbrook Community Center ballroom looked the way it always looked in December. Folding tables draped in white cloth, centerpieces made of pine branches and battery-powered candles, a podium at the front with a microphone that squealed if you stood too close. About 80 people filled the room. Business owners, their spouses, a few town council members, and Gary Penrose from the Willowbrook Gazette with his camera and a notepad. This was the social event of the year, for people who measured success by handshakes and eye contact. My father was at the head table. He wore a sport coat I'd never seen. Navy with brass buttons, the kind of jacket a man buys. For an occasion he's been imagining for years. Tyler sat beside him in a vest and tie, hair combed, looking like a catalog model who'd been told to seem responsible. Pam was in the second row of chairs, wearing a floral dress and a tight smile. She looked like a woman attending her own sentencing and pretending it was a birthday party. Lorraine and I arrived 10 minutes after the program started. Lorraine wore her good blazer, charcoal gray, sharp at the shoulders. I wore a white button-down, black slacks, and flat shoes. I carried the black folder against my chest the way you carry something that matters. We sat near the back. A few people nodded at Lorraine. A few more looked at me with the curious half-recognition you get in a small town when you've been away, but not forgotten. Dad saw me from the head table. His face tightened for a fraction of a second, then smoothed into the polished expression of a man performing ease. Tyler saw the folder. I watched his eyes drop to it. Stay there a beat too long, then dart away. His hand went to his water glass. He drank but didn't swallow for a long time. The awards moved through the program in the steady, polite rhythm that small-town ceremonies always do. Community Service Award went to the hardware store on Maple. Rising Business went to a woman who'd opened a bakery in the old post office building. Each winner stood, shook hands, held a plaque for a photo, and sat back down to applause that was warm but measured, the kind of clapping that says, "Good for you," without any of the sharp edges of envy. Then the MC called the final category. Our Business of the Year nominee, Ingram Auto and Tire, represented tonight by owner Ray Ingram and co-manager Tyler Ingram. Dad stood and walked to the podium with the dignity of a man who'd rehearsed this walk in his bathroom mirror. He gripped the microphone. This shop was built by my father, Harold Ingram, nearly 30 years ago, he said. His voice carried the careful weight of a man delivering prepared remarks. I took it over, and now my son Tyler is carrying it forward. 3rd generation. This award is for the Ingram men who built something lasting, the Ingram men. He said it like a toast, like a monument inscription, like it was the only part of the story that counted. I looked at Lorraine. She was watching Dad with an expression I can only describe as patient grief. The kind of sadness that isn't surprised anymore. Just tired. The MC stepped back to the podium. Before we finalize our board's due diligence review, board member Lorraine Ingram has requested to present a supplementary financial report. Dad's smile dropped. He looked at Lorraine. She didn't flinch. Then Lorraine turned to me and said, "Loud enough for the front tables to hear?" My granddaughter prepared the review. I stood up, folder in hand. The room shifted, the way air shifts before weather. I didn't walk to the stage. I walked to the auxiliary microphone stand near the floor, lower than the podium, level with the audience. I did that on purpose. I wasn't trying to stand above anyone. I was just going to hand them the math and let the math do the talking. "Good evening," I said. My voice was even, the same voice I use when I tell a patient what's happening with their vitals. Factual. Calm. No room for interpretation. In my role as a former bookkeeper for Ingram Auto, I was asked by a board member to review the shop's cash flow as part of the due diligence for this award. I opened the folder. 12 printed pages. I passed copies to each of the 5 board members at the side table. They took them the way people take documents they already half expected. No surprise, just seriousness. Over the past 14 months approximately, $18,000 in cash payments from customers were recorded in the service log but never deposited into the business account. The pattern correlates exclusively with shifts managed by Tyler Ingram. Page 3 contains a side-by-side comparison of service log entries and corresponding bank deposits organized by date and closing shift assignment. Tyler's chair screeched against the floor. He was on his feet. That's a lie. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't look at him. I turned the page. An independent certified public accountant, Patrice Gunn, reviewed these figures last week and confirmed the discrepancy. Her signed summary is on page 11. I set the folder on the board table and stepped back from the microphone. I didn't need to say anything else. The pages would do what pages do. They'd sit there being true until someone either dealt with them or walked away. Tyler was still standing, red from the collar up. Dad was still at the podium. His hand was resting on the Business of the Year plaque, like a man holding onto a railing at the edge of a cliff. The room was completely silent. Then, Tyler started yelling. "You don't even work there anymore," Tyler shouted. He pointed at me from across the room, his fingers shaking, his face the color of raw hamburger. You're just bitter because Dad picked me. That's all this is. She's been jealous since she was a kid, and now she's making up numbers to get back at us." The board members were reading. They didn't look up. The hardware store owner, Bill Pruitt, a man who'd known our family for 30 years, turned to page 3, ran his finger down the column of dates and looked at Tyler without expression. "These are bank records, Tyler. Numbers don't match what your service log says." Tyler spun toward Dad. Tell them she's lying." Dad was standing at the podium with the microphone still live. Every breath he took hummed through the speakers. He didn't speak. His silence broadcast itself across 80 people at white draped tables. Tyler turned back to me. "You ruined this family. You always wanted to take the shot from me." I looked at him. "I didn't take anything, Tyler. I just counted what you took." He slammed his palm on the nearest table. A water glass tipped. Ice scattered across the white cloth. From the second row, a voice I didn't expect. "Mom." Quiet, but audible. "Tyler, sit down." Tyler stared at her. That was the first time in 20 years of watching Pam Ingram navigate this family that I ever heard her say something that wasn't designed to protect the system. She didn't say it for me. She said it because the room was watching, and Pam had always cared more about appearances than truth. But she said it. And Tyler sat down the way a man sits down when his last ally just stepped sideways. Dad stepped down from the podium. He walked through the aisle between tables, slow, like a man walking to chest-deep water. He stopped in front of me. His voice was low. "Just between us." Except the room was so quiet that everyone heard anyway. "Why are you doing this? This is our family business." I looked at him. "It's your business, Dad. You made that clear when you told me girls carry the dishes." His jaw flexed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then he tried again. "Your grandfather built this shop for behind me." A chair pushed back. Lorraine stood. The room turned. She wasn't tall, but when Lorraine Ingram stood up in that ballroom, every person in the room straightened. She looked at her son, and she said it again. The same words she'd said in a hospital room 2 years earlier. The same steady voice. The same calm finality. "Sit down, Raymond." Ray sat, like he was 18 again and his mother had caught him lying about his homework. He sat down in the nearest empty chair and stared at the back of the person in front of him. Lorraine addressed the board. "I move to table the Business of the Year award for Ingram Auto and Tire pending a full independent financial audit. The board can revisit the nomination once the books are verified." The board chair asked for a second. Bill Pruitt raised his hand. "Vote. Unanimous. Tabled." The plaque that would have read Ingram Auto and Tire Business of the Year sat face down on the podium table. Nobody touched it. Dad sat in his borrowed chair with his hands clasped between his knees, and I realized he looked exactly the way he'd looked in the hospital 2 years ago. Except this time, 80 people were watching. The room broke into that particular hum of conversations that starts when Everyone has something to say, but nobody wants to say it first. Tyler was gone. He'd walked out a side door while Lorraine was speaking, and nobody tried to stop him. Pam sat alone in her row, hands folded, eyes forward, the posture of someone enduring a funeral service for a person they hadn't liked, but were expected to mourn. People at surrounding tables glanced at her. She didn't glance back. Dad stood. He moved toward the exit, head down, passing my row. He stopped. For a moment he stood there, half-turned, not quite looking at me. When he spoke, his voice was the quietest I'd ever heard it. I didn't mean what I said that night. He didn't say which night. He didn't need to. I knew which words he was talking about. The same words that played in my head. Every time it rained, every time thunder rattled a window, every time I drove past the drainage ditch on Route 7. I turned to face him fully. You said you were done raising a broken girl. I let the sentence sit there. Then you didn't raise a broken girl, Dad. You raised the only one who kept your books straight. He didn't respond. He stood there for another second, then walked out, through the main doors. They closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than Tyler's palm on the table. The room was quiet again. Lorraine took my hand. She didn't squeeze it. She just held it. The way you hold something you're not afraid of dropping. From the back of the room, Martha stood up. She started clapping. Slow, deliberate, the way someone claps when they mean it. A few others joined, not everyone, not a standing ovation. Just enough people to fill the silence with something warmer than applause. Lorraine walked to the podium. The MC handed her the microphone without hesitation. Nobody in that room was going to tell Lorraine Ingram her time was up. She adjusted the mic the way she did everything. One precise motion, no fiddling. Then she spoke. My husband Harold built Ingram Auto and Tire nearly 30 years ago. He was a good mechanic. He was a decent man most days. And he was not a good father to his daughters. She paused. The room held its breath. She knew it. He said so in a letter he wrote before he died. He said he'd built the shop for his boy and forgot his girls had hands too. He wrote that his daughter Kate could have run the place better than he ever did. Lorraine's voice didn't waver. Harold asked me to make sure his mistakes didn't repeat. They did. But his granddaughter stood in this room tonight and proved that his mistake and my son's didn't stick. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Effective January 1st, I'm establishing the Harold Ingram Memorial Scholarship for first-generation women students at Willowbrook Community College. It will be funded by rental income from the properties I built after Harold passed. 1 full tuition scholarship per year for a young woman who is the first in her family to attend college. She looked out at the room. My husband forgot that girls have hands. This scholarship makes sure nobody in this town forgets again. Girls carry more than dishes. They carry legacies. The applause was real this time, not polite. Not obligatory. The kind that comes from people who just watched something true happen in a room full of formalities. Martha was crying. The bakery owner was nodding. Bill Pruitt was clapping with his hands above his head. I stood in the back of the room with a letter, my wallet, and my grandmother at the podium. And for the first time in my life, the name Ingram felt like it fit. The weeks that followed were arithmetic, not drama. The Willowbrook Gazette ran a story the following Thursday. Business of the Year award tabled amid financial review. Tyler's name appeared in the 3rd paragraph. The article included a quote from Bill Pruitt. The board takes financial integrity seriously. We'll revisit the nomination when the books are clean. Ray hired an outside accountant. The first time anyone other than Martha or me had looked at those books in a decade. The accountant confirmed the discrepancy. $18,400, missing over 14 months, all traceable to shifts where Tyler was the sole closer. Ray fired Tyler the next week. No speeches, no confrontation, just a padlock on the supply room and a text message that said, "Don't come in, Monday." Tyler moved in with a friend in the next town. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just disappeared the way people do when the evidence is too heavy to carry and too public to deny. The shop survived, but smaller. Ray worked the bays himself most days with Martha at the front desk and one part-time mechanic. Business came back slowly. Some customers returned out of loyalty, others because Johnson's Auto had a 2-week wait for brake jobs. The plaque never got engraved. Lorraine's scholarship was announced in the same issue of the Gazette. First recipient, a 19-year-old woman from the next county whose father had told her trade school was for boys. She enrolled in the dental hygienist program and wrote Lorraine a thank you note that Lorraine pinned to her refrigerator next to a photo of Harold. Mom called me once after the ceremony. She didn't apologize. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I'm not happy, Mom. I'm honest. There's a difference." 6 months later, Dad called. His voice was different, thinner, like someone had turned the volume down on the man I remembered. "Can we talk? Just you and me." I agreed on my terms. The diner on Main Street, Tuesday at 2 sacks, the quiet hour between lunch and dinner when the only audience is a waitress, named Carol, and the coffee machine. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in the booth by the window, hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. He looked older than 50. He looked like a man who'd spent 6 months having the same argument with himself and losing every round. "I'm sorry," he said. No preamble, no conditions, no but. Just the words. I nodded. "I appreciate that." I waited a beat. "But sorry doesn't rebuild what you broke. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with the truth. About Tyler. About the truck. About why you chose him every single time you had a choice." He looked at his coffee. He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. For the first time in my life, my father sat across from me and didn't try to rewrite what happened. "And I'm not coming back to the shop." I said, "I'm a nurse. That's where I belong." He nodded. I paid for my own coffee, stood up. "I'll call you next month, Dad." I set the schedule. I set the pace. I walked out of the diner into a clear December afternoon, and the air smelled like cold pine and motor oil from the shop 2 blocks away, and I kept walking. That evening, I sat on the Rains porch, with a mug of tea, watching the last light settle over the fields. The rain came out and lowered herself into the rocker beside me. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. After a while, she said, "You know what your grandfather should have written in that letter?" "What?" "That the strongest thing a girl can carry isn't dishes or ledgers or someone else's guilt, it's her own name." I smiled. "A real one. The kind that starts slow and doesn't need an audience. Some families teach you who you are. Mine taught me who I refused to be. And sometimes that's the better lesson." That's my story. One storm. One lie. One grandmother who refused to let the cycle repeat. If this story reminded you that your value was never up for a family vote, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.